I'm Donal O'Donovan. I'm the business editor of the Irish Independent. That's my day job. I'm very delighted to introduce Sonya Lennon and Courtney, two of the best known, I guess, faces and voices in Irish fashion for those on the podcast. I suppose the theme of this series is about partnership, and we hear an awful lot in business. I hear an awful lot every day about the culture of the entrepreneur and the sort of the charismatic founder and the great strides that individuals do to make the world different. And I think in reality, in most businesses and most people's experience of work, it's actually working with other people that gets things done. It's kind of collaboration that actually achieves results, and it's finding ways of working with people that really sort of allows us to be successful. So that's why I think this is a really interesting idea, that rather than interview a person, we're interviewing a pair, a partnership. I'm delighted that you're a brace, yeah, the first partnership. So really interested to hear kind of the upsides of working together, and then the sort of dark sides, the downsides, why really you secretly hate each other and go home and seethe over the terrible things that have been done to you during the working day. So first of all, Sonya, I guess, I mean, you're synonymous with each other, and we all know you as a pair, but that's relatively recent in your working careers that you did work together. So just maybe tell us about what you had done before that.
Well, before I started working with Brendan, I was a stylist. I was a gun for hire. I was working on fabulous projects, film, international campaigns, fashion shoots, music videos, a bit of theatre. And my job was to create a story using clothes, or to help a story be told using clothes. And I absolutely loved it. It was what I always wanted to do. I had started in fashion retail. I had actually eschewed the idea of formal education, third level education, and wanted to get stuck in, wanted to work, and was drawn immediately to fashion. I had no doubt in my mind from the age of 11 that was the area I wanted to work in. And yeah, so I had been 20 years as a stylist and a contributor to both Head to Toe and Off the Rails. So I was known by the gang in RT, and then one day the phone call came to say, would you consider becoming a presenter of the show? And that's where it all began.
And Brendan, you more or less invented the internet. I feel.
Thank you.
And
I've been waiting for someone to say
internet
that for some
dating,
time, yeah.
Internet online travel booking, all that sort of stuff. So you'd been in the media. I mean, that's very much your background.
Television is my background, yeah. So I was actually how we met Teresa and why we're here today as well. Is we started, and we were just reminiscing, 1996 in Tyrone Productions on Riverdance, but I only took that job because it was a TV company. So I would pitch ideas across the lawn from being a production assistant on Riverdance, and then eventually got a job as a researcher on daytime television, and was only there about 4 months, and I wrote Wanderlust, and that was a really bizarre year in my life. I went from being a researcher on daytime television to being helicoptered into MIPCOM and selling that format to 19 countries, and then off to the BBC, and off I went. And so television is really at the core of what I did, and because just to completely leapfrog ahead, because I was kind of camp and kind of funny and not a bad presenter, my agents were pushing me to be a comedian, and I never wanted to be a comedian. I'm more of a content creator. I'm more interested in that side of things. So leapfrogged again to I bought the rights to the Close Show. The BBC had decommissioned the Close Show. I got the rights and brought back the Close Show, and RT had seen that, and I'd moved to England for a few years, and they contacted me and said, would you like to take over Off the Rails? And I was like, okay, let's have a chat. And actually I was running my own independent production company, creative director of that with my business partner, and we'd had 2 really good years and 1 really terrible year. And then a contract in RTE came, and I thought, okay.
But the funny thing was, when we both got the call, we both thought it was a single-hander.
Yeah.
We both thought we were being called to do it.
You were going to be the presenter.
We were both individually going to be it. These parallel thoughts were happening.
And because I had said no to a group, because Queer Eye was huge in the UK and in America, and I had said I didn't like what that represented. We were still fighting a cause politically. I didn't like the idea of it, and I had said, I'm not being in a lineup, I'm not doing Queer Eye, I'm not doing that. And I'd come from a lineup in Close Show, even though it was me and 2 women. Yeah. So I had specifically said, I don't want to be in a partnership or a lineup.
And I had assumed that it was a one-man job. Right. Like the naivety and arrogance of that, given that I'd never hosted a TV show before, but I just hadn't joined the dots. I didn't realise that it was going to be a 2-hander. And when the call came then to say, we'd like to offer you the job. Having screen tested and gone through all of that, we'd like to offer you the job with LennonCourtney. And I kind of went, oh, I didn't realise that it was going to be a two-hander. But the minute I heard Brendan's name, obviously I knew him through, we have very good mutual friends, both of us.
So tiny.
Yeah, so we knew each other at a slight remove, to say hi to. I loved what he did with Wanderlust. I loved his work, and I kind of thought, oh, okay, that's really interesting. And at the same time, across town, a similar thought process.
So I got a call saying, okay, right. And I had been very specific in production terms of what I wanted to do with the show, and if it to be honest, at a stage in my career, I was like, if it was going to be a failure, it had to be my fault. Right. So I couldn't just phone it in and then go, oh, it didn't work this time. You know, I thought if it doesn't work, I'll be responsible for that, and at least I'll have tried my best. So there was a very clear objective in my head, and they said, how do you feel about a two-hander? And I was like, oh, I hadn't considered that at all. I really had just thought of a lineup, really, to be honest. And I was like, who? And they said Sonya Lennon, and I was like, she won't do it. She had just done Adam and Paul, the movie, and was like, in Irish terms, was at the absolute peak of her game. So I was like, really? She's going to do television? Because she didn't know how poorly it was paid, I don't think. So they said, yeah. So I texted two friends of ours who are mutual friends, and I was like, Sonya Lennon? And they were like, amazing, really? Because we're gay, we only speak in single words.
And meanwhile, I'm sitting on the couch. It had all gone through. We'd taken the role. I said to my husband, looks like I have a new roomie. And he...
At the exact same, this is what we sort of... I had just texted Sonya, hey, roomie, because I got her number off the producer.
And he...
Not just that, but he's bugged our house.
Exactly.
That was that, yeah.
So you were thrown together, you were sort of flung together, you hadn't worked together before.
No.
How long did it take to sort of feel each other out as working colleagues?
I have to say, I had done a couple of two-handers in the UK, and actually I knew that, and I had done my own chat show on TV3 called the LennonCourtney Show, so I also knew the pressure of that on your own, and with the two-hander I knew, actually, it's kind of funner. Mm-hmm. There's two of you, you have each other's backs, you're going into a whole new production realm in an unknown environment for the two of us in that particular department in RTE. It's good to have each other's backs. So I knew there was a lot of pluses to having a partner in crime.
But no guarantee that it would work, right? So there's an element of risk there. And I suppose we hit it off from the get-go. But there were a couple of occasions where there were teething problems, because any relationship is about learning to communicate, understanding what's in the other one's head, you know, being intuitive to the needs of others. And there was a couple of glitches early on where there was miscommunication, there was a little bit of, you know, third-party malintent. You know, you get that with people being a little bit jealous and trying to stir things. And I remember at the time, there was a kind of a niggling feeling, and I knew where this kind of niggle was coming from. And I think it was definitely a kind of a misconception of what was happening. Yeah. And I was sitting at home on a Wednesday night or whatever it was, and I knew Brendan was down in Panty Bar at the time, and I turned around and I said to my husband, I'm actually just going to go down there because this is driving me mad. And I went down, stood up from the dinner table with the kids and everything. It was like, I'll be back in a minute. Went down to Panty Bar and went doink, doink, doink. I said, look, there's something going on here. It's not what you think it is. It's not happening. I'm telling you right now that as long as we're working together, we will be straight, we will respect each other, we will trust each other, and we will have each other's backs. Do you remember?
And I said, well, it doesn't matter what it was. The fact that you came down here tonight, clears the air totally. So that was the only time we've ever really had.
And it was somebody else's hand grenade, and that's the danger, because even when you understand each other, it's those kind of external factors that create the difficult situations. In relationships, in business, it's all the stuff that comes at you that you have to deal with.
And had you been aware that there was a niggle, that there was an atmosphere?
There was he said.
It didn't sort of come out of the blue.
He said situation within the team, and it actually wasn't really that.
It was nothing.
It wasn't that big a deal, but it could have. A younger me, to be honest, probably would have taken much more exception to it and probably been a bit more suspicious of it. I was a bit like, oh, whatever. But I think I had made a comment about it to you, and you'd kind of picked up on something, and that Sonya was like, no, that's not
But
what's
actually,
happening.
I think it's interesting because I think if you catch the little sparks before the fire starts, then and we both, that was very solidifying for both of us, that we kind of understood what we stood for together and separately, and that became a kind of a bedrock of how we moved through all the obstacles.
I suppose it's about just really identifying 100% trust, and then once you're in a relationship where you trust each other implicitly, you can listen to what the other person's saying about your business, you, anybody around you, and you just trust what they're saying, and that means that stress goes away, and that for me is key to it.
And being able to articulate when there is a problem, I think that's an issue that a lot of people have because they know there's a problem. They don't want to quite put their finger on it. They maybe want to avoid it, but you just felt.
Oh, I'd be great at that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I would be very reactionary. Sonya would consider.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's probably what happened that day. I probably said something, got out of the car. You considered it, and if it came up and we had chat. Yeah.
And how long did the Off the Rails relationship last then?
7 seasons.
7 seasons. Yeah.
In terms of years, I think it was about 5 years, was it?
Yeah.
And at what point did you know that sort of Off the Rails was part of your working relationship rather than what was going to define your working relationship?
Well, we were very strategically looking at the next step because we knew that we were at the whim of a commissioner. We knew that the whole thing could be pulled. There was a kind of a jeopardy around whether it would come back season on season, that we were both, I mean, you were more familiar with this idea that is it coming back, is it not coming back at the end of every season? I was like, this is crap. Like, why would you work like this? And I think I suppose the first thing that happened for me, you had a business background through the production company, through Giant in the UK. But when we started on Off the Rails and my profile kind of grew and all of a sudden people were asking me to host charity balls and events and put my name to this and be an ambassador for that, I thought, well, actually, if I have the power to add value to something like that, I want to control where that value goes. And then I read about Dress for Success, the London office, which is an organisation that helps women into employment. We give them a bespoke suiting session. We give them a HR session to mould their message. And industry average success at interview is 18%. We run at about 57%. So what we do really works. And we've helped 3,000 women get back into the job market. When I read about it, I thought, oh my God, that's complete alignment of everything that I can bring to the table. It's styling, it's confidence, it's positioning, it's messaging. I can use the network that I have, I can use the profile that I have. So it just seemed to be kind of harvesting all the good bits of what I could do and leveraging that. So I had to work very hard to get the license from the New York head office, basically. It took me a year and a half, and I launched the Not-for-Profit, which is a registered charity. And ironically, I suppose, the confidence that gave me, we both kind of at the same time came to the realization, well, look, if you can do it for a not-for-profit, let's put our own plan in place and figure out what we're doing outside of this current situation, and that's where the business piece started.
Because the default at that point for you would have been something new in television, the next development.
Yeah, I mean, but I've always worked in television. I continue to work in television. So does Sonya. But it's very precarious, and it's unless you go into. I didn't want to set up another production company that was running another business that was very precarious. It's a very competitive environment. We had exited, we'd sold our business, and then when I moved back, and it was fine. Didn't make millions, but it cleared our debts and stuff like that. But I knew that I wanted to shift into a slightly different lane, I suppose, in terms of business. So television, I knew, would always be there, but it was never going to be the main rent payer, I felt, in the long term. Yeah.
The other thing is that we were very clear that we wanted to, and this is going to sound horrendously harsh, we wanted to commodify what we had. Yeah. We wanted to create a product or a service or something that could create a revenue stream for us without us being in the room.
And LennonCourtney could transcend Off the Rails as a brand.
Yeah.
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically.
Yeah. I mean, and the other thing was, it was a surreal moment for me is when Debenham sent me flowers because I put a woman in magic knickers and they sold out all over Ireland. And I was like, okay, this is weird. We need to do our own brand of this. And just because the opportunity was there and it was right in front of us, really. So that was a very obvious moment as well.
It's probably an obvious moment in hindsight as opposed to at the time. So how did you begin to kind of to feel each other out on developing that as a business?
I was always looking at added value to the products that we did. So when I wrote Wanderlust, I took the idea of a website where you could book flights, and because we were showing people other things, and they were like, "Nah, never work." Expedia launched a year later, And then when we were doing Off the Rails, we were like, "Why can't people shop what we're showing them?" So we were bringing value in different ways, and sort of maybe technology ways that we understood. So to go into manufacturing was actually kind of probably harder than anything I'd ever done before, actually, to be honest.
And again, that was an external catalyst, because it was a friend, sort of an acquaintance of mine who was in the clothing business, who said, "Look, you guys have really high profile. We regularly rated number 1 on the trust focus groups in RTE. People trusted us because we knew what we were talking about. So we weren't just faces on the TV, we were experts. So you have this expertise, you have this trust, you have a profile. Why aren't you creating clothes?" And we kind of went...
So you have a brand, but you don't have a product.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So we originally went into business with him as a partner, and for the first 3.5, 4 years, we didn't take a single penny out of the business, and we put a lot in. And I remember we were talking about this recently. Brendan said to me, "Can you just remind me how we lived during that time? Like, how did we pay our mortgages? How did we eat?" And I just said, "I actually can't remember." I remember being really phenomenally tough.
Yeah.
Like brain-meltingly tough. But, and in fact, our partner at the time was taking 33% gross. There was less than nothing left for us. The whole model was completely flawed.
Yeah.
And how had that sort of arisen? So you had felt presumably uncomfortable or less confident in areas of the business that you needed to be in.
Manufacturing. He knew nothing about
We
it.
had no links to manufacturing.
He was the link.
So he said, "I'll hook you up."
Yeah.
And so we needed him as a middleman.
Or there is no product. Like, we could design all you like. You need a manufacturer,
Yeah.
And that was a kind of a real opportunity though as well,
Yeah.
because he had access to, he had loads of labels in his stable as well, so we saw what he could do.
And I suppose we were...
And he's still a friend, by the way.
He's still a friend, and we were very lucky, because at a certain point we had to say to him, "Look, either we go down the tubes or you jump off the bus.
Yeah.
Like, they're the options." And he graciously and gracefully did jump off the bus, because there was nothing there. But I mean, that was only the beginning of the torments that we went through. Like, it was horrendous. And if we knew in advance what we were going to go through to get a brand up and running...
Well, if I knew where the finish line was, I'd do it again. But there was so much...
Well, we're
so
not
often,
at the finish line.
Well...
There is no finish line.
The sort of the really hardcore... tap dancing at every sort of event to pay the rent in order to keep this business going. But there was, you can't forget about the passion about it. We actually loved the product. We actually really, really, really loved the product. There's a friend of ours wearing one of the outfits there today. So we'd get very excited when a box of product would come in, and like, I suppose any creator at the end of, like, when I make television, even though sometimes you lose on the production, when you see the product, you got really excited. So in some ways that would distract you a little bit.
Yeah,
and we do a photo shoot from the pain,
And aside from the manufacturing, when you had obviously the background in style, the background in TV and in style at that point, but the actual process of designing clothes, you were on top of that fully, Sonya, you were able to do that?
We both were.
On scale.
It was very much... well, actually, on scale is the interesting question, because only in the last month we have completely redesigned our design process to be fit for purpose, because when we were a tiny independent label, and when we licensed into Dunnes Stores, we had 4 drops a year. We now run at 10, 12 drops a year.
So when you say drops, that's a full
collection?
collection?
A collection. Essentially. And so there are 2 seasons, autumn, winter, and spring, summer, but within that we feed newness in all through the season. So the volume of product that we're creating now bears no relation to the original product. So we had to say, okay, well, what worked then doesn't work now. On every level, not only in terms of the outputs, but in terms of how we work together relationally. How can we put an insurance policy around how we create? So
what is the process at the start? So say the last the last collection, the last drop is gone, and you're there with a blank sheet presumably in front of you.
No, it doesn't work like that. It's very different. It used to be like beginning, middle, and end. You know, you start to design, then you put the show together, then you video, then you sell it, and then you go, oh, we better get the other one going. And then you are doing a couple of jobs at the same time. You're selling the next forward, and you're designing forward a little bit. Now we are constantly designing. We constantly have a role.
But in terms of the process, we start with palette. So we look at what the palette is, and that could come from anywhere. We look at our various print references. It's actually quite mathematical on a lot of levels because we have to tick a lot of boxes. We look at the proportion of. We start with the dresses because we are a dress brand. We build the look of the collection on the dress band, and all the other items fall out of that. Then we kind of allocate. You know, what's the occasion wear, what's the day wear, what's the print, what's the solid, what's the newness, what's the iteration.
And I suppose where that came from was a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, where we had just gone into Dunn's maybe a year, and we said, okay, for the first time we're going to do a collection in January. And we just very naturally, Sonya went, well, what does she need in January? And then we started to really focus on what were the needs of the woman we designed for.
So we actually did a big wall chart out with a calendar of
She's a holy comedian there.
What was in my head or her head, or that woman who that bullseye woman, you know, what's her thought process month by month throughout the year.
And that's a woman in Ireland with Irish weather as opposed to necessarily
100%.
predictable weather.
100%, yeah. And getting under the skin and really thinking about the needs and her preoccupation at any given time. And I think our woman understands that. A friend came up after a meeting the other day, out in RT actually, and said, can I just pay you a compliment? A friend of mine just has just gone for a big interview. And I said to her, are you okay, you all set? And she said, I'm all set. She said, I have my LennonCourtney, which means that I am professional. I'm really turned out, but I have a great personality. I said, okay, we've done our work. That's it.
Very happy with that.
And who's involved then? So obviously manufacturing is done overseas, I guess.
Yeah, of course.
And who does that?
So we start. Go on, Brendan, you go first.
Well, we started in Hong Kong, and we broadened out to about 4 bases. We're now in about 6 bases in Hong Kong into China. We're in Turkey. We're in Portugal, and someday we'll be back in Ireland. We made our knitwear in Ireland at the start, but there simply isn't the manufacturing base here at the moment. But so we're spread all across, and shoes are made in Italy.
And how do you identify and sort of understand who you can trust as a manufacturer, price as a manufacturer, find them?
Trial and error and recommendation. It's really weird. So Dunn's were kind of amazed by us because they're very tight margins. They're very skilled at what they do. We were novices. We did everything by Skype and by email, everything on CAD. So we only communicated design. They were really surprised that that's how we did it. We couldn't afford to fly to Hong Kong all the time. So we had never actually met our manufacturer, only on Skype.
We were the definition of lean. Right. We didn't even realise it.
But we would have an expectation that at least 30% of what we ordered would be absolute crap, and 70% would be great.
From sampling.
Right. Because we knew your description of this to what you get back, sometimes it just doesn't hit the mark. So manufacturing, by its very essence, is a really flawed system to get into because you're relying on someone else to interpret your idea of the product. So there's going to be lots of errors in it. So we kind of got used to that, and we would build that into the costs then. So we were actually quite lean and quite good at managing those areas. And then it's recommendation. Our first guy who started with us, he introduced it to another person. And then what you have in sort of big manufacturing areas are agencies who represent lots of different manufacturers. Now we have the luxury, we go all the time. We fly to meet them all the time.
And it's funny because what we didn't realise, and that's the thing about business and life in general, I suppose you don't know what you don't know. When we started, it was the equivalent of designing in a cardboard box with a few leftover bits and pieces that we could find. And as our volumes grew and our buying power grew, all of a sudden these doors would unlock. Right. And we'd be like, I never realised that room was in there. Yeah. And you do that? And that fabric? Really? You can? And all of a sudden, the bigger you get, the more you buy, they're taking you to the next level. And it is literally like Donkey Kong. Right. You don't know what the next level is going to be until you get there.
Yeah, we are always designed with end-of-run fabrics. So we would ask the manufacturer, send us what you have. So from the get-go, we were a sustainable brand because we just we used whatever was left over from other brands. And we still are at that stage where we design with whatever they've got. So we would take the fabric and normally we'd have a good idea of shape, but then we'd have a look at the fabric, what goes with what. We would work out how it would work based on what was available to us. So that kept our prices down. We never asked people to weave or dye for us.
And on the design side, do you have to do it all yourselves? Do you have a design team?
We have a little team.
We have a great team, yeah. So in terms of the process, going back to the process, we work out the palette, the print, the shapes. Josh, who's our design assistant, would develop them into computer-aided designs. Then we go to sampling, and the rest is history. We have a fantastic team.
So he does all the technicals for us.
Yeah.
And
but we would sketch.
I actually studied pattern cutting, and I was really good at it because when I came out of school, I studied accountancy. So if you're good with numbers, you'll be good with patterns because it's all
maths.
Yeah, it's maths.
And I did pattern cutting in NCAD by night as well. So the two of us, it was in the blood.
Yeah.
And how do you find people to work with? So when you're a small business, relatively small business, with big pressures for time, for turnaround, how do you find people who are going to work with you at that level and fit into this partnership?
So I suppose the interesting thing about the relationship with Dunnes Stores is that it is a licensing operation. The team are internal in Dunnes Stores, so we are benefiting from their incredible experience about building out the right team. We play now to our skill set, which is design and marketing. So we know that they're the two bits that we're really excellent at, and the rest of the process currently is managed in Dunnes Stores.
Is that a wrench? Is it hard to let go of parts of processes?
No.
No.
No, I used to say, my kind of joke was, I don't want to do the adding up, because I remember we were in a situation with the bank manager and somebody else, and he said, I need a set of management accounts, and you did. I said, I can do them, that's fine. And you were like, what? You can do that? I was like, yeah, I don't like doing them, but I can do them. I can do a cash flow and a set of management accounts. So a lot, like very clunky basic ones, whether or not you're going to drown tomorrow. But I can understand that. So handing that piece over to a slightly more qualified person was very, very nice indeed, yeah.
And also that's the benefit of experience, that you don't have to be good at everything.
You don't have to do everything.
You just be good at what you're good at and get better at it and fill the skills gaps.
And when we were on our own, we kind of had to try and be good at everything, and it was really hard, yeah.
And LennonCourtney's the main business day to day, but you are both involved in other things and overlapping with other things. How does that work?
Kind of seamlessly in a way, and I don't know how it works.
Common understanding.
Yeah, it is. It's so.
We have a gentleman's agreement.
We do. Like we work on other things as well. So we're about to put together a series of events and a book called The Loving Wolf, which we've written the guts of, and really that came out of this idea that we have developed a process in our day-to-day lives that has helped us to be more effective, and that we know that would be of benefit to the women who shop our clothes, and we would like to afford an opportunity to share that with a network of women who speak a common language, who have a common goal, and we would like to give more value to that woman because she's really important to us.
What is The Loving Wolf?
So The Loving Wolf is really about controlling the controllable and managing the uncontrollable. It's a process and a way of being that we've developed over the last 10 years. Through trial and error. And it's everything from how to manage our day-to-day, to prioritise, to goal set, to work out an action plan out of the goal setting, to manage our own sort of health and well-being, and to understand what is required of us to be fit for purpose to go forward in a very, very busy schedule. We're not claiming to be psychologists or nutritionalists, but we do know that we have hit on something that has helped us to wake up smiling every day while juggling a very, very busy schedule.
And a big part of that is fostering a really good partnership with somebody for support. I mean, I regularly stand side of stage with other designers who are doing it by themselves. But you're right, you'll get a friend who's an accountant come up and tap them on the shoulder who's supporting them. They have somebody else there. And I always say it's so much more fun with two. It's so much better that somebody can ring at 10 o'clock at night and go, holy shit, what happened today? You know, it's just so great because even your life partner doesn't work with you and understand the day-to-day runnings of it. And you also find you probably bore them with it as well. So it's just better as an adult to have somebody you can account for.
At 10 o'clock at night, are you thinking, is this fella never going to leave me alone? Or are you thinking...
No, we get it. Like we're very in tune with each other. I mean, it does get a bit sort of Muppet Show, Bert and Ernie when
we're turn up in the same clothes. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
And it's happened so many times we've stopped questioning it. We were at what was that?
We were at a pitch. We were at a big investor pitch.
And we turned up, and I had a Kelly green jumper and a pair of creamy chinos, and Sonya.
And I had a Kelly green skirt and a cream top. And we walked into the room together, and we're like, "Oh my God, we look like we're doing the Eurovision. What is going on? Like this is really bad."
So it's like a home and change because we look like a pair of Muppets, and you were like, "No, screw it, come on, we're fine." But yeah, so we I don't know where that comes from. That colour thing is weird, but yeah, we would be in tune with each other very much so. And we'd also understand when one person's under a bit of pressure, and we've been through a lot of personal stuff together as well, and really supportive of each other, illness, loss, lots of things. And I think that's really solidifying about how you handle each other as well. I always say if I'm, over dinner with a group of friends, how come you and Sonya are so tight? And an example of that was on New Year's Day, we went for a hike with our families, and there was about 25 of us, and we ended up together on the Tree Rock Mountain coming down New Year's Day. I mean, how different was my New Year's Day to my 20s, my God. But we were coming down Tree Rock Mountain, yapping away, and so, these two women passes by, and Sonia's sister, she overheard them saying, "See, I told you they were real good friends."
And do you learn to sort of anticipate when trouble is coming with each other? I mean, because everyone has bad days, everyone has points of stress, or even kind of predictable points of stress.
You do know. You know when it's going down.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Particularly with me. Yeah.
And what do you do?
It would be a case of understanding how it's got to this point, unpicking it, and depersonalizing it, and figuring out what in the process can make it better. And I suppose that's what happened with the designing piece, that it was getting so big, and it was the question that people asked all the time. Do you fight about designs? Do you do you disagree? And we would always say, no, we don't disagree. And then all of a sudden, it was getting so big that we were disagreeing, and we were like, now, hang on a second. This is wrong, and it's actually wrong because we're not being clear with ourselves first, because all of a sudden it was going to the wider team before we had clarity. Yeah. So we kind of shut everybody out and said, no, hang on a second. Us in a room, we sort it all out first, then we present it to you. So there's unity there, and we know what we're talking about. Because we don't want to be arguing in front of the kids.
And that was because it had grown really quickly as well in the last 6 months. It's really grown again really quickly, and the demands on our output was really growing as well. So stuff was happening, and we were seeing, going, how did that happen? So we just had to redefine how that worked. But
very, very quickly, we've seen the benefits of that.
Yeah.
Like, we designed that in the last month, and already, even in terms of how we manage that development process, it's better.
So the answer is to take a step back together.
I think it is, and it's very rarely personal.
Right.
It's because something's not working as well as it should be.
Right. Yeah.
And that's not someone, it's something. Some element of the process is not right anymore.
Yeah. And how do you marry that then when you're off doing other projects and maybe not around all the time? How does that play out?
Just clarity. So we would be...
well, Wednesdays are sacrosanct, for example.
Yeah.
Wednesdays are LennonCourtney team meetings, design, and we could easily spend 3-4 days a week on LennonCourtney in any given week.
I've always said that the more time you give it, the more time it needs.
Yeah.
It really does, because the expansion possibilities are enormous. Even within that organisation, it's a huge organisation, ships to 30 countries. So so you just have to manage that as well, and not lose sight of where we are going as well. But I'd say as well, our personal well-being is very important to both of us as well. So we would be I would never compromise my training days, very rarely, unless it's something really important, and we know that. Because actually, that just keeps your headspace clear as well, and there's a real understanding of that. Also around holiday. But what we do is, it's not even about prioritising holiday or working out. Or it's actually, we can check where we're at in the schedule of output and we're fine.
Well, our diary is shared in there anyway, so we know where the other one is at any given time, you know. And look, we're on the phone all the time, whether we're in the same room or not. That's a given. And I think the other projects that we do, which are really, really important to us, are part of who we are, and they're very much aligned to who we are as LennonCourtney. So there's no way either one of us would do anything that didn't fit with our own personal values and our brand values. It just wouldn't occur to us.
Right.
So
you've never had to have a conversation where Brendan, for instance, you said, well, Sonya, I think that might be a bit off-brand or a bit too far away from what we do.
No, because the brand is in us. Like, it's who we are as people.
And we've worked too hard to conceive it and, you know, and bring it into the world. And now it's been such a rocky road of amazing failures and successes that actually it is like a child that we nurture and care for now. And so it's our priority in terms of pretty much everything we do. But we also, we like to use our profiles for other good if we can and stuff like that. So yeah, it's never been a compromise.
And at this stage, sort of this far away from Off the Rails, do you conceive of yourselves as business people? Is that sort of how you think of yourselves as people who run a big business?
Yeah, I always did though, because the minute I went to the UK, I set up a production company. It just kind of happened. Once you're doing your own VAT return and your own PAYE, your own wage, you're running a business, and that all the trappings that go with that, whether it's getting sales in or cutting costs and all the things I've done that now 3 times, so I understand it.
The other thing, I suppose, for me at the beginning, when I considered myself a creative. I was a fashion stylist. That was my craft, and it was really important to me. And I before I went into business, I didn't see business as a creative art form. I now do. Like, it is the ultimate creation. You start with nothing and you turn nothing into something, and then you watch something grow into something else. Like, you can't get more creative than that, except potentially having children. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's wonderfully creative, and it's using your brain in a very different way. That strategic piece and constantly looking forward is. I just find it fascinating.
And it's interesting you focus on the design part, because I always say about the design part, for us with a combined experience of over 45 years, it was like Adele getting a record deal at 48. We had all this wealth of information around design and what women want, so we were dying to put that somewhere. So to commodify that product and then put a business structure behind it was a very interesting process for us.
And what's next for the business structure then? So that business structure presumably can support other things now.
Well, I suppose Wolf is part of that. Developing that community of women out and giving them other things and sharing with them. That's very much part of it.
And also for me personally, connecting with an audience, just fascinates me. So whether it's through tech, whether it's through a book, how you can enlighten or add value to a customer is just, I just love that process. So sometimes it really works and sometimes it absolutely fails. But either way, if we have a common purpose, which is to add value to somebody who buys your product, it's a very clear message. You just have to give value, and if they like the value, they'll continue to come back for more. So it's a very interesting process for me personally as well.
It's brilliant. It's 2:00. I'm conscious some people need to get back to work. Thank you very much, Sonya Lennon and Brendan Courtney. That was absolutely fascinating. Thanks for joining us here at the O'Kelly Theatre at the NCI, which is lovely on this very, very sunny day. Thanks very much to Gavin Hennessy on sound, to Gina Quinn for introducing us. She's gone. To Teresa Murray from NCI, and to Ronan Turner from The Independent. And thank you very much.